never should have stayed late at school that day. The familiar halls of Jefferson High felt different after hours, the fluorescent lights casting an artificial glow that made everything look sickly and wrong. As the faculty advisor for the yearbook committee, I often worked late, but something felt off. The silence was deafening. The first sign that something was wrong came at 6:47 p.m. I was editing photos when an emergency alert lit up my phone. Shelter in place. This is not a drill. Remain indoors. Lock all doors and windows. My heart started racing as I read the message twice, then 3 times. Through my classroom window, I could see police cars speeding past, their silent lights painting the rain-streaked glass in alternating red and blue. Acting on instinct, I locked my classroom door and wedged a chair under the handle. Years of lockdown drills had trained me well, though they'd always felt like a formality before. I killed the lights and crouched behind my desk, trying to steady my breathing as I searched for more information on my phone. The local news website was down. Social media was flooded with panicked, conflicting reports. From my second-floor window, I could see chaos unfolding in the streets below. Cars were abandoned at odd angles, some with their doors still open. In the distance, thick black smoke rose above the tree line. The wail of sirens grew closer, then abruptly cut off. The silence that followed was somehow worse. After an hour of crouching in darkness, my bladder was screaming for relief. The faculty bathroom was just down the hall. Surely it would be safe to make a quick trip. I crept to my door, pressing my ear against it. Nothing. The hallway bathroom was 30 steps away. I counted them in my head as I moved, keeping close to the wall. The bathroom mirror was cracked, creating a spiderweb pattern that fractured my reflection into dozens of pieces. As I washed my hands, a distant crash made me freeze. The crash came from the direction of the cafeteria. Logic told me to return to my classroom, but I needed to know what was happening. The emergency exit sign cast a red glow across the scattered chairs and tables. It looked like everyone had left in a hurry. Trays of half-eaten food still sat on tables, milk cartons spilling their contents onto the floor. Following the sound led me to the science wing. The door to the advanced chemistry lab was ajar, its window shattered. Inside, the acrid smell of chemicals burned my nostrils. Broken glass crunched under my feet as I entered, drawn by a strange rhythmic sound. A steady drip. Yellow warning signs reflected the emergency lights. Caution, biohazard. That's when I saw the blood. A dark trail led from an overturned chemical shower, disappearing around the corner. My phone's flashlight revealed bloody handprints on the wall, as if someone or something had been dragging itself along. The trail led to the stairs going down to the basement level. I knew I should turn back, but I could hear something moving down there. The basement was even worse. Steam hissed from damaged pipes, creating an oppressive humidity that made it hard to breathe. The emergency lights bathed everything in a hellish red glow. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness, the sound echoing off concrete walls. My flashlight beam caught movement ahead, a shadow darting between the pipes. The old boiler room looked like something from a nightmare. Huge machines loomed in the darkness, decades of rust eating away at their surfaces. A shaft of light from a street lamp far above filtered through a ventilation grate, illuminating particles of dust dancing in the air. The blood trail ended here, at the feet of the massive central boiler. A wet, organic sound came from behind it. In the corner, I found answers I wish I hadn't. A dozen barrels lay scattered, their hazard labels clearly visible. Experimental compound, unstable, extreme caution. Several had been knocked over, their contents forming luminescent puddles on the floor. A partially dissolved hazmat suit lay nearby, still smoking. I found more clues in the security office. The monitors showed empty corridors, but something was wrong with the feed. Bursts of static obscured crucial moments. In one frame, the hallway was empty. In the next, through the static, I could see something moving, something that didn't move like a human should. My retreat was cut off by sounds from above, heavy footsteps and a weird, wet, slithering noise. I descended deeper into the basement, trying to remember the layout from fire drills. There was an old service tunnel that led to the gym. If I could reach it, I might find a way out. The stairs groaned under my weight, decades-old concrete crumbling at the edges. The service tunnel was worse than I imagined. My flashlight beam seemed to be swallowed by the darkness. Water dripped from rusted pipes, forming fetid puddles that I tried to avoid. My footsteps echoed no matter how carefully I moved. Something skittered in the darkness ahead of me. Probably rats, I told myself. It had to be rats. I emerged into the gym, hope rising as I saw the emergency exit signs. Then I heard it, a sound like wet leather being stretched and torn. My flashlight beam revealed the exit doors were chained shut. The sound came again, closer this time. Something moved in the bleachers, making them creak. The beam caught a glimpse of glistening flesh, distorted and wrong. I sprinted for the locker rooms, hoping to find another way out. Steam filled the air. All the showers were running at full blast, scalding hot water, creating an impenetrable fog. My phone's screen suddenly lit up with another emergency alert. Containment failed. Evacuate immediately. Avoid all contact. As if I needed the warning. In desperation, I pulled off a ventilation grate and crawled inside. The metal was cold against my hands and knees as I dragged myself forward, trying not to think about what would happen if I met something in here. After what felt like hours, I saw light ahead, another grate leading to the outside world. I emerged into the parking lot, gulping the cool night air. Police helicopters circled overhead, their searchlights sweeping the area. In the distance, I could see the quarantine perimeter being established, red and blue lights, military vehicles, men in hazmat suits. I ran toward them, not daring to look back at the school. Behind me, something screamed, a sound no human throat could make. I made it to the perimeter, just as they were closing it off. Through the chaos of evacuation, I caught fragments of conversation. Chemical exposure, genetic mutation, containment protocols. They took my clothes, made me shower in decontamination solution, drew blood for testing. I never went back to teaching. The school was demolished a month later, the ground salted with chemicals. But sometimes on dark nights, I still dream of those empty halls, of the sounds in the basement, of whatever was created when those barrels spilled. And I wonder, did they really contain it all? Or is something still down there, growing, changing, waiting in the dark? Working the night shift at St. Mary's Hospital was usually quiet and predictable. As a senior nurse in the rehabilitation wing, my patients were mostly stable, and my biggest challenges typically involved paperwork. That changed on a cold Tuesday in November. I was at the nurses' station, updating charts, when the first Code Silver alert flashed across my computer screen. Code Silver meant armed intruder. We'd done the drills, but nothing prepares you for the real thing. I quickly locked down the nurses' station and began implementing our security protocols. As I moved to secure the wing's entrance, I found an overturned medical cart, supplies scattered across the floor. Something was wrong. The cart had been perfectly organized during my rounds just 10 minutes ago. The security monitors showed chaos unfolding in other parts of the hospital. People running, doors slamming, but no clear sign of the threat. Then the cameras on the first floor went dark one by one. Second floor followed. Whatever was happening was moving up systematically. We were on the fourth floor. I ducked into the supply room to gather emergency supplies, bandages, medications, anything we might need. The sound of breaking glass echoed from somewhere down the hall. My hands shook as I stuffed supplies into a bag. A bottle of morphine slipped from my fingers, shattering on the floor. The sound seemed deafening in the silence. The hospital pharmacy had been ransacked. Cabinets were smashed open, their contents strewn across the floor. This wasn't a typical armed robbery. The expensive drugs were untouched. Instead, someone had targeted specific medications. The inventory list was still on the counter, certain items circled in red: antipsychotics, experimental trial drugs, chemical restraints. The research lab on our floor told another part of the story. Specimen containers were broken, their contents pooling on stainless steel counters. Warning signs had been ripped from the walls. A logbook lay open, its pages torn and bloodied. The last entry caught my eye. Trial subject number 47, severe adverse reaction to compound. Terminating study immediately. Room 417 had been patient the 47s. The bed was overturned, restraints torn like paper. Medical equipment had been ripped from the walls with impossible strength. The patient file was missing, but a single page had fallen behind the radiator. It mentioned unprecedented muscle density and heightened aggression as side effects. The doctor's final note was a single word: unstable. A strange sound echoed through the ventilation system, something between a growl and a scream. The metal vent cover near the ceiling was dented outward, as if something had tried to punch through from inside. Long gouges marked the steel. They looked like claw marks, but that was impossible, wasn't it? The staff cafeteria looked like a war zone. Tables were flipped, chairs crushed. The soup of the day still steamed in puddles on the floor. A trail of blood led to the kitchen. Inside, the industrial freezer door had been torn from its hinges. Raw meat was missing from inside. My mind struggled to process what kind of person could do that, or why they would. The kitchen's knife block was empty. Blood droplets made a trail across stainless steel counters. Not just human blood, there were darker patches, almost black, mixed in. I found a dropped syringe nearby, its label identifying it as part of the experimental drug trial. The liquid inside was a sickly green color, unlike anything I'd seen before. My search for answers led to the morgue. The heavy metal doors were dented outward, as if something inside had tried to force its way out. Warning signs were posted everywhere: quarantine area, no entry, and biohazard level 4 containment. The electronic lock had been disabled, its panel torn from the wall. Inside was worse than I imagined. The refrigeration units were broken, releasing clouds of cold mist that swirled around my feet. Body bags had been torn open, their contents missing. An autopsy was clearly interrupted, surgical tools scattered, notes abandoned mid-sentence. The last words written: cellular mutation unprecedented. Subject still showing signs of activity after death. A service tunnel connected the morgue to the main building. Steam hissed from overhead pipes, creating an artificial fog. My flashlight beam caught movement ahead, something large moving in the shadows. The sound of bare feet slapping against wet concrete echoed off the walls. Then a new sound, sniffing, like an animal catching a scent. I found temporary shelter in the generator room. Massive machines thrummed, providing emergency power to the critical care units above. An electrical panel sparked dangerously, casting intermittent light across the room. I tried to radio for help, but all frequencies were jammed. Through the static, I caught fragments of military communication. Containment protocol Delta, shoot on sight, no survivors. The elevator shaft was my last hope for escape. Looking down, I could see the basement level was flooded with emergency vehicles, flashing lights. The cables swayed slightly, as if something was climbing. A distant roar echoed up the shaft, closer now, much closer. The sound of rending metal came from below. I emerged into chaos. The loading dock was filled with military vehicles. Men in hazmat suits were establishing a quarantine zone. Spotlights swept the building's facade. Gunfire erupted from the upper floors. Through a broken window, I caught a glimpse of something moving with inhuman speed. Its shape was vaguely human, but wrong, twisted, and malformed. They took me to a quarantine tent for decontamination. Through the plastic walls, I could hear officers discussing containment protocols and acceptable casualties. Someone mentioned genetic enhancement trials gone wrong. The hospital was sealed off, declared a military zone. The official story blamed a gas leak. But I know what I saw. I know about patient 47, the experimental drugs, the mutations. Sometimes I wake up at night, remembering those sounds in the ventilation shafts. And when I read about missing persons cases in the city, I wonder, did they really contain it? Or is it still out there, hunting in the darkness, growing stronger with each passing day? The last train of the night was running late. As the station supervisor for the Central Line's western terminus, late trains usually meant overtime and paperwork. I stood alone on the platform, checking my watch again. 11:47 p.m. The train should have arrived 17 minutes ago. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, creating strange shadows in the tunnel's mouth. In the control room, the monitors showed nothing unusual, just empty tunnels stretching into darkness. But something about the signal readings was off. Train number 247 had triggered the sensors at junction 23, but never reached 24. It was as if it had vanished into the 3-mile stretch of tunnel between stations. The maintenance panel near Platform 3 started beeping, a power fluctuation in the western tunnel. Red warning lights flashed across the diagnostic screen. Power consumption was spiking to unprecedented levels, but nothing was scheduled to be running on that line. The system showed multiple breakers tripping, one after another, moving closer to my position. The radio crackled with static when I tried to contact train number 247. Through the white noise, I caught fragments of something that might have been words, but they were distorted, wrong somehow. The transmission log showed the train's last communication. Unknown obstruction. Tunnel walls compromised. They're coming through. I took the service tunnel, following the power failures. Emergency lights cast red shadows on wet walls. Pipes overhead leaked steam, creating an artificial fog. My flashlight beam caught movement in the darkness ahead, something skittering across the ground, too fast to track. The maintenance key card in my pocket suddenly grew warm, then hot enough to burn. The generator room was my first clue that something was terribly wrong. Tools were scattered across the floor, as if dropped in a panic. One of the massive generators had deep gouges in its metal casing, cuts that looked almost surgical in their precision. The logbook's final entry was a single word: evacuate. In the electrical room, circuit breakers were popping like firecrackers. The main power distribution panel had been torn open, its wiring exposed. Something had been feeding on the electricity itself. The security camera footage showed only static, but in frame-by-frame playback, I caught glimpses of metallic appendages like insect legs made of chrome. I found train number 247 half a mile into the tunnel. It was tilted at an impossible angle, as if something had pushed it off the tracks. The windows were shattered inward, and the metal of the car was different, changed. In places, it seemed to have merged with something else, creating hybrid structures that pulsed with faint light. The train's doors had been sealed shut by some kind of crystalline growth. It spread across the metal like frost, but it moved and shifted when I shone my light on it. The surface was warm to the touch and seemed to react to electrical currents. My phone died the moment I tried to take a photo, its battery completely drained. The station's server room had been transformed into something out of a nightmare. Computer cables moved like living things, reaching for power sources. The machines had been consumed by the same crystalline growth, forming hybrid structures that hummed with energy. Network cables pulsed with light, transmitting data to somewhere deep in the tunnel system. The maintenance bay was a graveyard of machinery. Our automated cleaning robots lay in pieces, their components stripped and reformed into something new. Oil mixed with a silvery fluid I didn't recognize. One robot was still partially functional, its screen displaying a message in corrupted text: evolution in progress. The ventilation system had become a breeding ground for whatever this was. Metallic growths covered the walls, spreading like electronic kudzu. They seemed to be drawing power from the electrical systems, growing stronger. I could hear something moving through the ductwork, a sound like thousands of metal legs skittering on steel. Back in the control center, the system map told a terrifying story. Power failures were spreading through the network like infection. Whatever had started here was moving outward, following the electrical grid. The emergency protocols weren't designed for this. How do you fight something that turns your own infrastructure against you? At Junction 23, I found the point of origin. The tunnel walls had been transformed into a hive of mechanical growth. Arcs of electricity jumped between crystalline structures. The air itself felt charged, making my hair stand on end. This wasn't just an accident, it was an invasion. Technology evolving itself into something new, something hungry. I ran for the emergency exit, taking the stairs 3 at a time. The mechanical infection was spreading faster now, consuming the metal steps behind me. Each step made a different sound. The structure of the material was changing at a molecular level. I could feel the vibrations through my boots, like the whole underground system was becoming one massive organism. I emerged into a city already under siege. Manhole covers glowed with an eerie blue light. Electrical transformers exploded one after another as the infection reached them. Traffic lights flashed random patterns, and car alarms screamed in dissonant chorus. Above it all, I could hear something massive moving through the tunnels below, a sound like grinding metal and crystalline chimes. The military quarantine came too late. They established a perimeter, set up electromagnetic pulse generators, tried to contain it, but they didn't understand what they were fighting. It wasn't just spreading, it was learning, adapting, evolving. Every piece of technology we used against it made it stronger. The official story blamed a terrorist attack, then a computer virus, finally settling on infrastructure failure. They sealed the tunnels with concrete, cut power to whole sections of the grid. But late at night, I can still hear it growing. Sometimes my phone screen flickers with strange patterns. The traffic lights on my street flash in sequences that almost make sense. And I wonder, did we contain it? Or is it just waiting, spreading through our networks, preparing for the day it finally emerges to remake our world in its image?